Tyler Montgomery was the quiet, obedient son. Elaine was the devoted mother, always volunteering. Harold, the hard-working father, never missed a Sunday at church. Grace and Noah were the heart of the home, creative, curious, and full of life. To everyone in Elkmont, the Montgomerys were the kind of family others admired. But in the span of a single night, that image shattered forever when one of them turned into a cold-blooded killer. What drove a 16-year-old boy to murder his entire family and vanish without a trace? This is the story of the worst family massacre in Oklahoma's history. The Montgomery family lived just outside the small rural town of Elkmont, Oklahoma, on a wide stretch of farmland that had been passed down through generations. Their house, a white two-story structure with blue shutters and a wraparound porch, stood like a postcard image against the backdrop of open fields and grazing cattle. Harold Montgomery, the father, was known around town as a reliable and fair man. He ran a modest cattle operation and frequently helped neighbors without being asked. His wife Elaine was deeply involved in the local church and spent much of her time organizing charity events, baking for fundraisers, and volunteering. At the elementary school, together, they were admired by nearly everyone in town. Their 3 children, Tyler, the oldest at 16, Grace, age 12, and Noah, just 8, were polite, well-behaved, and regularly seen at school events and local sports games. Tyler played baseball for the high school team and was known as quiet, but responsible. Grace was creative and often brought home art awards, while Noah, the youngest, had a wild imagination and a love for toy trains. The family didn't cause trouble, didn't gossip, and didn't draw attention. In many ways, they were exactly the kind of people everyone in Elkmont aspired to be. Their home was a place of comfort and structure. Dinners were eaten together every evening. Sundays were reserved for church and family drives. Neighbors often said they were the most normal family in town, steady, dependable, without drama. The Montgomerys rarely had visitors, but when they did, they were generous. Hosts, offering homemade lemonade and baked goods without hesitation. Their property was well maintained, their fences freshly painted, and their fields free of overgrowth. There were no outward signs of trouble, no whispered rumors, no warning signs. But beneath that surface of perfection, something darker was stirring, something no one had noticed. Tyler, the eldest son, had always been a little different. Teachers described him as intelligent but emotionally distant. He kept to himself, rarely smiled, and had few close friends. Still, his behavior was never alarming enough to raise concern. Schoolwork was acceptable, and he followed rules without complaint. He didn't lash out, didn't break the law, didn't show the kinds of red flags that typically accompany serious mental health issues. To most, he was simply shy or maybe a bit introverted. The Montgomerys didn't appear to have any enemies. Financially, they were stable. There were no reports of domestic disturbances. Police had never been called to their home. In a place like Elkmont, where everyone knows everyone, trouble has a hard time staying hidden. But in the Montgomerys' case, there seemed to be no trouble at all. That's what made what happened next so shocking. The tragedy that would unfold on their land didn't just horrify the town, it shattered its very sense of security. Because if something this evil could grow in a family so seemingly perfect, then what else could be hiding behind closed doors? In the quiet heart of Oklahoma, on the morning of October 12, 2008, the sun rose over Elkmont like any other day. The air was crisp, the skies were clear, and everything in town moved at its usual slow pace. But just a few miles outside the town limits, something was very wrong. The Montgomery house had been unusually quiet for 3 days. No one had seen the family at church on Sunday. The kids hadn't shown up to school. Elaine hadn't called into the food pantry where she volunteered. At first, neighbors assumed they had gone on an unannounced trip, maybe to visit distant relatives or take a spontaneous break from their routine. But as more time passed without any sign of them, unease began to settle in. It was a family friend, a nearby neighbor, Frank Wilkins, who decided to check in. He drove up the dirt road that led to the Montgomery property and immediately noticed something strange. The mailbox was overflowing. The family's 2 cars sat undisturbed in the driveway. The front door was shut, but the porch light, usually off during the day, was still on. As he knocked, then called out, the silence inside felt heavy, growing. Concerned, Frank let himself in through the back door, which was strangely unlocked. What he found inside would mark the beginning of the darkest chapter in Elkmont's history. The house was eerily still. The smell hit him first, strong, metallic, scent mixed with the unmistakable stench of decay. The family dog sat quietly in the hallway, its tail not wagging, its eyes dull. In the living room, the television was still on, frozen on a paused cartoon from days earlier. Frank moved further into the house and discovered the first body laying. Montgomery lying in the kitchen, single bullet wound marked her head. There was no sign of a struggle, no broken furniture, no blood splatter beyond what pooled around her. Panic surged through him as he searched the rest of the house. One by one, he found them: Harold in the master bedroom, Grace in the upstairs hallway, and little Noah in his bed. Each had been killed in their own space. The most disturbing discovery was in the garage, where a badly burned body was found. Near a pile of charred debris, investigators would later assume this was Tyler, the eldest son. When the police arrived, they were overwhelmed by how clean and deliberate the scene was. Nothing was stolen. There were no signs of forced entry, no signs of a robbery gone wrong. Whoever had done this knew the layout of the house, knew the habits of the family, and had taken their time. Every victim had been killed in a controlled, precise way. No screams, no mess, no witnesses. The killer had likely walked through the house calmly, moving from room to room, the most unsettling detail. The family dog had been left unharmed, suggesting the killer wasn't a stranger. And if that were true, it meant the horror had come from within. The investigation into the Montgomery family murders quickly became the largest law enforcement operation Elkmont had ever seen. State Bureau of Investigation joined local authorities, combing through every inch of the property and surrounding land. Helicopters scanned the area from above, while officers on foot moved through fields and tree lines looking for any trace of the killer. The entire town was on edge. Schools went into lockdown for several days. Families double-locked their doors and slept with lights on. The idea that someone could walk into a home and silently wipe out an entire family without leaving a trace was terrifying. The first theory was a home invasion gone wrong, but that idea quickly fell apart. Nothing was taken. Expensive electronics, cash, and firearms were left untouched. There was no forced entry, no broken locks or shattered windows. Every door had been locked when investigators arrived, except the back door, which the neighbor had entered through. The precision of the killings, the neatness of the crime scene, it didn't match the chaos. Typically seen in burglary-related homicides, attention soon turned to people close to the family. A former employee on Harold Montgomery's farm had been fired 6 months earlier for showing up drunk and threatening coworkers. He had a criminal record and a bad temper, and investigators considered him a strong suspect. He was brought in for questioning and held for 2 days. But his alibi was airtight. He had been visiting his sister in Kansas at the time. Phone records and security footage confirmed it. Just like that, the strongest lead vanished. Desperation grew. The media began covering the story, turning it into national news. Reporters camped out near the Montgomery property. Satellite trucks lined the edge of the dirt road. The question on everyone's mind was the same: who could do this, and why? Wasn't until a 17-year-old classmate of Tyler Montgomery came forward that things began to shift. He had remembered something strange. A few days before the murders, he had seen Tyler at a small gas station just outside of Elkmont. Tyler was alone and paying cash for a box of ammunition. At the time, it hadn't seemed suspicious plenty. Families in the area hunted or kept firearms. But after hearing that Tyler was believed to be dead, the memory started to feel more important. Investigators went back to the gas station and pulled security footage. There it was, clear video of Tyler wearing a hooded sweatshirt, purchasing ammunition from the counter just 4 days before the murders. The timestamp proved the sighting, but there was a problem. According to the original investigation, Tyler's body had already been identified. His remains were believed to have been found in the garage. Suddenly, everything was in doubt. Autopsy had been rushed due to the body's condition. The identification had relied on clothing and nearby belongings, not dental records or DNA. Realizing the mistake, authorities ordered a second forensic review of the remains. What they discovered changed everything. The body in the garage wasn't Tyler Montgomery. The confirmation that the body found in the Montgomery's garage wasn't Tyler Montgomery sent shockwaves through the investigation. Everything the authorities thought they knew was suddenly unraveling. The remains belonged to a distant cousin of the family, Jason Cole, a 19-year-old from Texas, who had been staying with the Montgomerys temporarily. Few people in town even knew he was visiting, and his name hadn't come up in the early stages of the investigation. Tyler had managed to make it appear as though Jason was him by dressing the body in his clothes, leaving his own wallet nearby, and ensuring the remains were so badly burned that positive identification would be difficult. It was a calculated move, one that suggested long-term planning and chilling intelligence. With this new revelation, Tyler became the prime suspect in the murder of his entire family. A nationwide manhunt was launched. His photo was broadcast across news stations, posted in gas stations and truck stops, and shared on social media. The thought that the killer had not only escaped but successfully faked his own death created panic and fascination in equal measure. How had a 16-year-old boy planned something so brutal and complex without anyone noticing? For days, there were no leads. Tyler had vanished. The Montgomery property was searched again, this time with the assumption that the killer had intimate knowledge of the land. Investigators found signs that someone had taken supplies from the family's storm shelter water bottles. Canned food and a hunting knife were missing. They began to suspect that Tyler hadn't gone far. 7 days after the bodies were discovered, a sheriff's deputy patrolling an old gravel road near a line of abandoned storm bunkers noticed something unusual: a recently disturbed patch of dirt near one of the shelters, as if someone had been digging or dragging something. Upon closer inspection, he found a makeshift sleeping area hidden behind a wall of crates inside the structure. And then, crouched in the dark corner, was Tyler Montgomery. He didn't resist. He was quiet, dirty, and underweight with bloodshot eyes and hands stained with soot. He was arrested on the spot and taken into custody. What he told investigators during his confession would horrify even the most seasoned detectives. Tyler admitted to killing his parents and siblings one by one over the course of a single night. He said he waited until they were asleep and moved through the house slowly, methodically. He described it in a detached, emotionless tone, offering no explanation other than that he had grown tired of his life and wanted a new one. He confessed to luring Jason into the garage under the pretense of showing him something, and killing him and setting fire to the room to cover up the identity of the body. A journal found in Tyler's bedroom provided even more insight into his disturbed mind. It contained months of planning, sketches of the house layout, and written fantasies about living a life free from control, expectations, and family. The trial of Tyler Montgomery began under a media spotlight that turned the quiet town of Elkmont into a temporary epicenter of national attention. Reporters flooded the courthouse steps. Satellite vans parked along dusty roads. People who had never heard of Elkmont before now followed every detail of the trial, fascinated and horrified by the boy who murdered his entire family. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was heavy, silent, and tense. Tyler sat with his attorneys, showing no emotion. Never looked at the photos displayed by the prosecution. He never reacted to the testimonies. Even as the surviving relatives gave statements through tears, he remained still, blinking slowly, as though none of it concerned him. The evidence against him was overwhelming. The murder weapon had been recovered. His fingerprints were all over the scene. His journal outlined every step he took before and after the murders. His confession was detailed and consistent. For the jury, there was no doubt what shocked them. More than the crime itself was Tyler's lack of remorse. Not once did he apologize. Not once did he express grief. He spoke about the murders like they were a logical step in a process, not the destruction of his own blood. The defense tried to argue diminished capacity, citing Tyler's psychological evaluations and his history of isolation and emotional suppression. They presented a picture of a troubled teen, disconnected from reality and buried in years of inner turmoil. But the prosecution countered with a different image, one of a cold, methodical killer who planned everything down to the minute. In the end, the jury took less than 3 hours to reach a verdict, guilty on all counts. Tyler Montgomery was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was transferred to a maximum security facility, where he would spend the rest of his life in solitary confinement. For safety reasons, he was kept away from the general prison population. He rarely spoke to guards or counselors, refused therapy. He never asked for visitors, simply faded into the system. Just another number behind bars. Back in Elkmont. Life tried to move forward, but nothing was quite the same. The Montgomery property was sold, and within a year, the house was demolished. The land was left empty, overgrown with weeds and silence. No one wanted to live where so much blood had been spilled. The local church held a memorial service each October to honor the lives lost, but attendance dwindled over time. People wanted to forget, even if they couldn't. The town, once proud of its close-knit community, now lived with an invisible scar. Parents became more cautious, teachers more alert. Conversations about mental health began to surface, though always in whispers. Everyone still asked the same question. How could no one have seen it coming? The Montgomery case remains the darkest chapter in Oklahoma's history of crime. It's not because of what happened, but because of who did it. A boy raised with love, surrounded by support, who chose to destroy it all.